In lesson 6 in this series, I explained how you could play arpeggios of diminished seventh chords and also diminished scales when you're improvising over dominant seventh chords with a flattened ninth. In this lesson, I want to look further at the use of diminished scales and how you can use patterns from one diminished scale over 4 different dominant sevenths with a flattened ninth. And I also want to look at rootless voicings for the left hand. There is a PDF available, the link is in the description below, and this PDF contains all the material from both lesson 6 and this lesson in all 12 keys. Let's start off then with a quick recap from lesson 6 about the relationship between dominant seventh chords with a flattened ninth and diminished seventh chords. So that's a G7 chord, that's the dominant seventh in the key of C. If we add the note A, that's the ninth. Change that to A flat, that is the flattened ninth. Now, if I take the root note G away, we're left with a diminished seventh chord. Now, diminished seventh chords are unique in that all the intervals in them are the same. They're just a stack of minor thirds. B to D is a minor third, so is D to F, so is F to A flat. And because of that, there isn't really any such thing as an inversion of a diminished seventh chord. What do I mean by that? Well, normally when you invert a chord, it changes the sound of it. By putting a different note in the bass, it changes the sound of the chord. When you invert a diminished seventh chord, because all the intervals are the same, it just sounds higher. It doesn't sound different. So, although we could name that B diminished seventh, D diminished seventh, F diminished seventh, A flat diminished seventh, they're all basically the same chord. Now, because of that, we can actually put 4 different root notes underneath that and make 4 different dominant seventh chords with a flattened ninth. We started off with G7 with a flattened ninth. Now, let's put the note B flat down in the bass. We've got B flat 7 with a flattened ninth. That's the flattened ninth, 3rd, 5th, 7th. Let's put the note D flat underneath. D flat 7 with a flattened 9. That note is now the 7th. That note is the flattened ninth, the 3rd and the 5th. And then one more. E7 with a flattened 9, B is now the 5th, that is the 7th, the flattened 9th, and that is the 3rd. Now, it follows, therefore, that any of the arpeggios or patterns from the diminished scale that you can play over a G7 with a flat 9th, you can also play them over a B flat 7 with a flat 9th, a D flat 7 with a flat 9th, and an E7 with a flattened 9th. Let's just have a quick recap about the diminished scale. If we look at the diminished seventh chord starting on B again, and then we approach the next note each time with a semitone below it. So we're going from B to D, approach it from a semitone below. Now the next note in the chord is F, approach that from a semitone below. Next note in the chord is A flat, approach that from a semitone below, and so on. So that scale can be played over G7. If I play a G7, I'll just play the root and the sevenths down there. Over B flat 7. D flat 7, play that an octave higher, and also over E7. By the way, there's often confusion over the terms whole tone half tone scale and half tone whole tone scale, and all it means is what note you start off on the scale. So if you look at a G7 chord and you start the diminished scale from the note G, the root, you go up a half tone, a whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone, and so on. But if you started the scale from the A flat, the first note of the diminished seventh chord, then you go whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone. So they both contain the same notes. Let's have a look now at how I can take a simple pattern from the diminished scale and play it over the 4 different dominant 7th chords. So in each case, I'm going to play this simple pattern from a diminished scale. And I'm going to play that first of all over G7. So it'll be the same pattern on each dominant 7th chord. On each tonic, of course, it will be something different. The left hand, I'm just playing root and 7th, shell voicing going to root and 3rd. Let's do this over B flat 7 going to E flat major 7. And now over D flat 7 going to G flat major 7. And finally over E7 going to A major 7. I'll have to do this up an octave. So you can see how the same pattern but played over different chords can sound quite different. Remember that dominant 7th chords quite often, instead of resolving down a perfect 5th, resolve down a semitone. So for instance, G7, instead of going to C major 7, could go to G flat major 7. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play G7 going to G flat major 7. On the G7, I'm going to play that same pattern. On the G flat major 7, I'm going to borrow what I played when I played D flat 7 going to G flat major 7. So just a quick reminder, I did this. So let's do that starting with G7. And it works really well. So you can do that exactly the same idea starting on the 4 different dominant 7th chords. So I'm going to do B flat 7. Instead of going to E flat major 7, I'm going to go to A major 7. From D flat 7, I'm going to go to C major 7. And E7, I'm going to go to E flat major 7. Now, I said at the beginning that I was also going to look at some rootless voicings for the left hand when you're playing dominant 7th chords with flat and 9th. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a diminished 7th chord. Let's look at that one, F diminished 7th. And remember, you could play that over G, make it G7 flat 9, B flat 7 flat 9, and so on. You could use that on its own as a rootless voicing for the left hand, but I'm going to tweak it slightly by taking the top note D up a tone and getting that sound with a lot of tension in it. Now that note is the next note up from D in the diminished scale, and that voicing can actually be played over those 4 different dominant 7th chords. So G7, F is the 7th, A flat the flat 9th, B the 3rd, E the 13th. Play over B flat 7 sounds different, sounds quite a bit harsher there. Each note of the chord has adopted a different function. That is now the 5th, the 7th, the flat 9th, and that is the sharpened 11th or flat and 5th. Play over D flat 7, F is the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, the sharpened 9th. I'll play it over E, I'll play it up an octave though. F is the flat 9th, the 3rd, the 5th, and the root. And you can do that with 4 different positions of the diminished 7th chord. So I started off with that one and put the top note up a tone. You could do the same thing with that position, put that one up a tone, and that will work over the 4 different dominant 7th chords. Put that one up a tone, put that one up a tone. Now, I actually prefer to leave a note out of those voicings. Excuse me. So let's look at that first one. In each case, I'm going to leave out the next to the bottom note. So I'm going to leave that one out. Now, you may well recognise that as a fairly standard voicing for a G7 chord. If I put G down in the bass, we've got the 7th, the 3rd, the 13th. It's much easier to get your fingers around those 3 notes, and it's really sort of useful if you're playing a fairly fast passage. Something like at the beginning when I was going through a cycle of dominant 7th chords, and I was just playing 3-note voicings in the left hand. Now, as I said, I used those left hand voicings at the beginning. What I was doing at the beginning was just playing a simple exercise using that pattern from the diminished scale, going through the cycle of dominant 7th chords, and in the left hand I was just alternating 2 of those voicings. That one, the G7, F is the 7th, B the 3rd, E the 13th. When I went to C7, each note went down a semitone, so now we've got the 3rd, the 7th, the sharp 9th, F7, everything goes down a semitone again, and we're back to the first voicing, 7th, 3rd, 13th, and so on. Just going down in semitones. At certain points, if you go through the whole cycle, like just there, I would then go up again and start there. Otherwise, you're going to end up with chords that sound a little bit too muddy if you go too far down. In the right hand, I was basically just playing that same pattern nearly all the time. I had to do the odd little change here and there. For instance, on the 4th bar, when I got to the B flat 7, it was getting a bit high up the piano, so I just played a descending arpeggio, just playing down the notes of the diminished 7th chord. And then that took me to G, the 3rd of E flat 7, so I could carry on with the pattern. Now, I only got to the E flat at the beginning. If you do get the PDF, it goes right through the cycle, and on the last bar, D7, it finishes with, which means that if you want to repeat the whole thing, you're in the right place to start again. Okay, by the way, just a quick word about the PDF. If you do get it, I would try to work out the different examples in different keys yourself first, and then use the PDF for reference. If you simply just use the PDF and try and memorize everything from it, you're not really thinking through it. You're not thinking, what is this note in relation to this chord? So, as I say, try and work it out yourself, and then if you want to check it, use the PDF just for reference. Hope you found that useful. If you did and you haven't done so far, I'd be really glad if you could give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and always glad to have any comments or questions. In the next video, I will be looking at forward motion. Thank you. See you in the next video.